Uranium undoubtedly has really bad PR, but to me it's just an element in the periodic table. It's about what you use it for. The reason we've been looking at uranium is it sits at this very interesting crossroads point in the periodic table, and these two rough areas of the periodic table, transition metals and lanthanides, have very different types of chemical reactivity, and so you wonder whether uranium might combine both of those types of reactivity, and if it does that in catalytic processes, you might get access to new ways of making new molecules that are currently really difficult to make. The contents of this paper basically show that we've got strong evidence that actually uranium can behave like a transition metal and execute some very fundamental reactions that underpin almost all catalytic processes that are used by chemical industry to make our plastics and so on and so forth. We don't know this for sure, but it could be that one day a plastic which has the mechanical performance that you require of it, but also will nicely disintegrate back to simple organic components when you bury it in the ground. It just might be that a monomer unit that you make that polymer with can only be assembled with an element like uranium. We're talking about molecules that could be the basis for making new wonder drugs that could produce a cure for a particular form of cancer, or solving various other ailments that we increasingly suffer from because we live longer on average. Catalysis is a very important process executed by industry on huge scales. Often these processes make millions of tons of product every year, and the reason we use those processes is they lower the activation barrier to producing the molecules that are made out the other end. This saves energy, it reduces waste, and it basically means that we can make the things we need to support society in more efficient ways. We were looking at a variety of problems, and one day we noticed when we made this compound in the paper that when we were trying to isolate it, if you heated it under vacuum, remarkably this orange material emerged from it, and it turns out that that orange material is the reactant that we put in at the beginning. And this is one of the keys to transition metal catalysis, that a lot of the individual steps in a catalytic cycle are reversible. But overall, you rely on one preferential feature to drive the reaction forward. But once you get reversible reactions, you open up the notion that you could start to cobble together catalytic cycles and make new types of molecules. What catalysis is all about is bringing together 2 or 3 separate molecules, breaking some bonds and adding them to a metal. Then another substrate comes in and bolts on to one of the original fragments, and then eventually at the end of the cycle the metal spits out this coupled product which you wouldn't have been able to put together by any other way. The reaction itself is actually very simple. So I've got here a molecular model of iodomethane. So this is a carbon with 3 hydrogens and an iodine on it. And that carbon-iodine bond is reasonably weak, but it'll hang around for most of the time, unless you bring it into proximity with a metal, which I'm going to represent with this purple ball here. If this comes within proximity of our metal, then the metal can cleave this carbon-iodine bond. And so what we've now done at the metal is we've cleaved that carbon-iodine bond and made two new bonds to the metal, one to the carbon, one to the iodine, which is now formally an iodide. This is oxidative addition, and the metal has formerly been oxidized. In other words, it's lost some of its electrons and used them to make the bonds to these new ligands. It would be possible to insert something, say, into the metal-carbon bond, and then the whole thing can go away again, and you've made a new organic product. And this is how catalysis builds bonds to make new molecules.